Love is often painted as the ultimate blessing, the thing that completes us, the answer to all our loneliness. Yet, for every man who has dared to open his heart, there is a shadow that follows. The quiet terror that the very person he cherishes most could one day shatter him. Society whispers that this vulnerability is weakness, that trusting another with your heart is a reckless gamble, and that pain is inevitable. But what if that interpretation is only half the story? What if the fear, the trembling, the hesitation is not a flaw, but a doorway to understanding something deeper about connection, trust, and the nature of power itself? When you love, you are not merely handing over your heart to another. You are inviting the world to teach you about courage, surrender, and the delicate art of balance. The paradox of love is not in the possibility of destruction, but in the recognition that by choosing to trust, even in the face of potential ruin, you participate in a truth far more profound than any safety the mind can imagine. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe, share, and leave a comment with your thoughts, because by engaging, you help spread this reflection to men who may be trembling quietly, uncertain if opening their hearts is worth the risk. The journey we are about to explore will challenge the familiar stories we tell ourselves about love, control, and power, and it may reveal that the very vulnerability we fear is the source of freedom and strength we have been seeking all along. Before a man truly understands love, he lives as if the heart is a fortress, built stone by stone to keep out danger, rejection, and disappointment. He measures connection by control, gauges intimacy by how much he can protect himself, and believes that holding back is the only way to survive. He flirts, he charms, he gives pieces of himself carefully, always calculating the cost, always fearing the blow that might come if he dares to trust completely. To the world he appears cautious, sometimes cold, even detached. To himself, he feels alive only in fleeting moments, never fully immersed, never entirely present, as though standing behind a glass wall that separates him from the raw pulse of life. Yet this careful avoidance, this self-imposed isolation, is not strength. It is a slow suffocation of the spirit, a subtle imprisonment in the name of protection. Then comes the awakening, the recognition that love is not about control, and that the heart's exposure is not a weakness, but an invitation. The moment a man hands someone the power to touch his deepest self, to hold the keys to his vulnerability, something shifts inside him. Fear does not vanish, but it loses its tyrannical grip. The world has not changed, but he has. He perceives the risk differently. Trust becomes an act of creation rather than submission, a conscious choice to allow another to mirror him, to engage in a dance of interdependence that neither diminishes nor defines him entirely. This realization reframes the very nature of connection. To love fully is not to surrender to destruction, but to participate in a shared courage, an acknowledgement that the heart can survive even if it breaks, that pain, when embraced, can illuminate truths about oneself that comfort and control never could. Externally, others may notice a subtle difference. He no longer calculates, no longer tiptoes around intimacy with hesitation. His presence is steadier, more magnetic, yet enigmatic. He seems less concerned with appearances, less desperate for validation, less tethered to outcomes. To friends and strangers alike, he may appear reckless or even distant because he refuses to hide behind walls, refuses to negotiate the terms of his humanity to fit societal expectation. Yet beneath this apparent recklessness is a profound alignment, a man aware that the act of loving, in its deepest sense, does not require the obliteration of self, but the full embrace of it. Internally, the effect is transformative. The heart becomes not a fragile object to guard, but a living compass, guiding decisions, deepening awareness, and clarifying the boundaries between what can be shared and what must remain sacred. Each interaction, each act of vulnerability, sharpens his discernment. He sees not only the other person's reflection of his desires and fears, but also the contours of his own resilience, patience, and capacity to forgive. What once seemed like danger now carries the scent of possibility, and the uncertainty of love becomes an essential rhythm rather than a threat. Every moment of risk taken is a step toward a self he never fully knew. A man whose power is measured not by how he shields himself from the world, but by how fully he participates in it, heart open, eyes wide, and spirit unrestrained. Before this awakening, a man's understanding of love is often entangled with illusions crafted by culture, family, and past disappointments. He believes that to be loved is to earn it, that validation is the currency of connection, that desire must be managed or measured to avoid pain. He clings to routines, to predictable roles, to unspoken agreements that dictate how a man should give, how he should protect, how he should suppress parts of himself to fit the mold of acceptable masculinity. He negotiates intimacy as if it were a transaction, calculating how much to reveal and when, fearing the consequences of unguarded truth. This armor, painstakingly built, provides the illusion of safety, yet it isolates him, blinds him, and stunts the natural rhythm of love that moves freely when the heart is acknowledged rather than contained. The deconstruction begins when he stops participating in the agreements that demand his fear, when he notices the patterns, the compulsions to impress, to compete, to hide his vulnerability. He begins to question their foundation. What is this need for approval really protecting? Whose expectations am I fulfilling? Does hiding my desire, my uncertainty, my tenderness make me stronger, or does it make me smaller? By observing these structures without judgment, he sees that they are sustained not by truth, but by habit, by inherited notions, by the quiet insistence of society that a man's heart must be contained or risk annihilation. This recognition is subtle at first, like a flicker behind the eyelids, but it grows into clarity, a quiet revolution in perception. As the illusions dissolve, he discovers that trust is not a fragile vase to be carried cautiously, but a bridge to deeper connection. Love does not demand perfection or absolute control. It thrives in the presence of honesty and awareness. He begins to notice the tension between what he has been told about being a man and what he truly experiences when he allows himself to care without calculation. The world, he realizes, will interpret this differently. Friends may whisper that he is naive, colleagues may judge him for showing softness, and society may label him fragile, but their interpretations no longer bind him. He understands that being seen for who he is, without concealment, is not vulnerability in the sense of weakness, but power, the power of alignment, the power of integrity. In this space, the man begins to see relationships not as tests of survival, but as mirrors reflecting his own capacity for courage, empathy, and presence. Every interaction, every act of openness teaches him about boundaries, about resilience, about the paradox that true safety is not found in avoidance, but in conscious engagement with the unpredictable, with the risk of being known. Others may misread him as distant, aloof, or even arrogant, but the truth is that he has become a man who measures his life not by the fear of loss, but by the depth of his participation. He is neither reckless nor naive. He is awake, grounded, and capable of both tenderness and strength in ways that the old, unexamined patterns could never allow. Others often see a man who has dared to trust as strange or distant. They notice a subtle shift in how he speaks, how he carries himself, how he responds to the world. To them, he may appear aloof, maybe even arrogant, because he no longer bends to the expectations that once constrained him. He does not seek constant validation, nor does he measure his worth through the eyes of others. On the outside, it seems as if he has grown cold or detached, but the truth is far richer. Inside, he is present in a way he never was, fully alive, attentive, and anchored in his own understanding. The tension between appearance and essence becomes a quiet rhythm. The world reads caution where there is clarity, distance where there is focus, and silence where there is strength. This divergence between perception and reality is a crucial part of transformation. As he interacts with friends, colleagues, and loved ones, their reactions illuminate the old agreements he once followed blindly. Their confusion, their judgments, their misinterpretations serve not as obstacles, but as mirrors reflecting the depth of his change. Each misunderstanding reinforces the lesson that external approval is optional, and that the heart's true measure is found not in the gaze of others, but in the courage to be fully present, fully human, fully vulnerable. What once felt like weakness now reveals itself as strength. The trembling vulnerability of giving your heart to another, of trusting despite the risk of betrayal, is not a flaw. It is proof of courage, of authenticity, of the willingness to live fully. Desire, once a source of anxiety, becomes a guide, pointing toward what matters, illuminating the places in the heart that demand attention and care. Loss, once terrifying, is no longer a verdict but a teacher, showing that clinging does not preserve life, and that freedom is found not in possession, but in presence. Each familiar idea is turned inside out. What seemed fragile is resilient. What seemed empty is rich with awareness. What seemed dangerous is a portal to understanding. By reframing these concepts, a man begins to see his own life as a canvas where love, fear, and desire coexist, not as opposing forces, but as instruments of insight, shaping him into someone who moves with quiet authority through the currents of life. In this process, he notices how subtly the world had defined him through its judgments. Masculinity was once measured by avoidance, dominance, and control, but now he recognizes it as presence, discernment, and honesty. Loneliness is no longer a void to fear, but a space for reflection, where he learns the rhythms of his own heart and the depth of his own courage. Failures are not endpoints, but markers on a path of growth, each one teaching the art of surrender and the wisdom of choosing again. Through this reinterpretation, he comes to understand that the very things he feared, the pain of trust, the uncertainty of desire, the risk of loss, are the very things that carve the channels through which his power, clarity, and freedom flow. As this new understanding takes root, the transformation begins to ripple outward, subtly reshaping every corner of his existence. On the surface, it may seem that he has grown distant or unapproachable. Friends notice that he no longer bends to trivial judgments, that he no longer engages in petty competitions for approval, that he moves through social spaces with a quiet authority that does not seek attention but naturally commands it. Colleagues may sense a calm confidence, a decisiveness that was previously absent, and women may notice an ease and authenticity in his presence that feels both magnetic and unsettling. To those who expect him to react as before, to chase validation, to hide his uncertainty, to perform his masculinity according to outdated scripts, he appears almost unrecognizable. Yet beneath this exterior, he is not aloof or disconnected. He is deeply engaged with life, fully present in every interaction, and profoundly attuned to the subtleties of human connection that he once overlooked. Inside, the change is even more profound. The constant anxiety over approval and success begins to dissolve, replaced by clarity and focus. He no longer measures his worth through outcomes or the perception of others, but through the alignment of his actions with his values. Decisions that once caused inner turmoil now emerge naturally, guided by an intuitive sense of what is true for him, what preserves integrity and fosters growth. Every encounter with risk, every step into uncertainty, becomes an exercise in presence and discernment rather than fear. The pressures that once weighed on him, the endless comparisons, the silent competitions, the obsessive need to perform, are recognized for what they were: illusions that had no real claim on his life, constructs that could only persist as long as he consented to their authority. By stepping away, by refusing to participate in the narratives imposed upon him, he reclaims the freedom that had always been his, but remained hidden beneath layers of fear and expectation. This freedom is not abstract. It manifests concretely in his daily life. He speaks and acts with a simplicity that communicates honesty and strength, without the need to embellish or manipulate. His relationships, once entangled with obligation and expectation, now unfold with clarity. He loves fully, aware that vulnerability is not weakness, but the truest expression of power. He works and creates with purpose, not for recognition, but because engagement itself brings fulfillment. Even failures, setbacks, and moments of solitude are no longer burdens. They are instruments that refine his understanding of himself and the world. The man who was once trapped in cycles of insecurity, comparison, and fear now inhabits a life of quiet mastery, a life where the outer appearance of distance is merely the shadow of inner depth, where solitude is not emptiness, but a reservoir of clarity, and where the power to live fully emerges precisely from the courage to embrace vulnerability. In this evolved state, he experiences the paradox at the heart of human existence. The things he once feared, exposure, risk, loss, become the very channels through which he discovers freedom, strength, and peace. What looked like weakness in the eyes of society is revealed as resilience. What seemed like emptiness is full of insight. What appeared to be isolation is in fact the fertile ground of clarity and self-possession. He moves through the world without apology, yet without arrogance. His life no longer dictated by the silent pressures of approval, but animated by the quiet certainty of self-knowledge. Every choice is informed by this alignment. Every interaction carries the weight of presence, and every moment, even those of discomfort or challenge, serves as a mirror reflecting his depth and capacity. He is not withdrawn or cold. He is fully awake, fully human, fully alive. What once seemed like isolation now shines as clarity, a quiet lucidity that illuminates the edges of his life and mind. The struggles that once felt unbearable, rejection, uncertainty, vulnerability, are no longer chains but gateways, each one a doorway to a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. The man who was once anxious, restless, and fearful has become grounded, not by conforming to what others expect of him, but by embracing the truths that were always inside him, waiting to be acknowledged. Weakness has transformed into power, not the power that imposes, controls, or dominates, but the power of presence, discernment, and integrity. Loss has been recast as liberation, a shedding of illusions that no longer hold him back, a letting go that creates space for authentic connection, insight, and fulfillment. He is not rejected or abandoned. He is whole, at peace with the cost of truth, and aligned with the rhythm of his own existence. Others may misinterpret his quiet confidence, his refusal to play the games of approval and status. But this misunderstanding matters little because his life is no longer dictated by the gaze of the world. He has discovered that living fully, honestly, and vulnerably does not require the permission of others. It requires only courage and awareness, the willingness to feel deeply, to engage fully, and to trust the inherent value of his own experience. In this state, every choice, every gesture, every relationship becomes infused with authenticity. The outer world may still present its illusions and pressures, yet he navigates them with a steady mind and a liberated heart, aware that the true measure of a man is not in appearances, possessions, or accolades, but in his capacity to be fully present, fully awake, and fully himself. If this reflection resonates, take a moment to share it with someone who may need to hear it today. Subscribe for more insights into life, presence, and freedom. And join the conversation by leaving your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Every comment enriches the discussion, giving life to a community of men seeking meaning, clarity, and strength in a world that often tells them they are never enough. Remember, the journey is not about becoming more in the eyes of others. It is about returning to the fullness of what you already are, and in that recognition, finding peace, power, and liberation.